All right, welcome to Built for Motion, a show all about the current state of packaging across all types of industries. Today you'll be joining Sreyas Dasika of Megalab Group, myself, Greg Wilson of Tony Wilson Marketing and Sales, Manufacturers Representative, and my special guest, Tim Floyd of Geolean USA. In this episode, we'll delve deep into the world of e-commerce fulfillment and distribution. Tim and I will discuss lean material flow solutions and how to apply them to your own complex distribution environments. Sreyas will explore how real-world damages are translated into lab-simulated outcomes using packaging testing standards. Please write any questions you have in the comments as we go, and we'll open the floor at the end to answer them. We sincerely appreciate you coming out for our second episode of Built for Motion, where we hope to add a little bit more flow to your material woes. So today, I think we should get started with Sreyas's presentation. I think we're going to be probably about 15 to 20 minutes long for each presentation, and then we'll have a good solid chunk of time at the end to cover any questions you have for us, for Sreyas, for anybody. So without further ado, Sreyas, how about you take it away?
Amazing. Thank you, Greg, for the fantastic intro. And I will take it away. I'm going to share my screen and get my slideshow on here so that we can review some of the interesting topics we put together for this episode of Built for Motion. Bear with me one second. Spoiler. Okay, so this presentation focuses wholly on testing the e-commerce product distribution process. And the way we do that, give me one second. There we go. Lovely. So essentially this presentation is going to break down a little bit of the complexities of the e-commerce distribution environment. And then from there, we're going to break down a little bit more about the differentiation between the skid, case, and unit level. The implication being the tests that are conducted at each of these package levels might vary based on the handling and vibration profile of what's to be stressed on the actual structure. So before we get too deep into it, maybe I can give you a little bit of a background. First and foremost, who are Megalab Group? So Megalab Group, your one-stop shop for ISO accredited testing. We have representation in both the US and Canada, and we offer independent compliance services. We're third party, and our results are good worldwide. We carry out testing in the aerospace, medical, industrial, consumer electronics, consumer packaged goods, and we aim to meet ISTA, ISO, IEC, NEMA, ASTM, and MIL standards. That's a little bit about us. Now, a little bit about me. My name is Sreyas Dasika, and I oversee package and environmental testing. I'm a business line manager here. I have almost 9 years of cross-industry experience and try to bring that level of passion. And, I heard this thing a while ago that you need to torture the data until it confesses. And that's the approach that I bring to both methodology of testing as well as my methodology to business and helping the clients get their results. So moving on a little bit to, the actual topic of today's focus, we need to talk a little bit about e-commerce distribution. I'm sure no one is any stranger to the complex changes in buyer habits that have happened, especially during and post-COVID. A greater shift has been made towards digital distribution and e-commerce distribution, with third-party intermediaries shipping directly or direct to consumer from a manufacturer. In this presentation, we're going to focus a little bit about how the products are cut up through every stage of this process and the stresses that they face at each of those levels. Now, talking a little bit about the complex process that is e-commerce distribution, why is it that way? I think it has a lot of reasons, but one of the big facets of complexity here is the variety of services that interlock to actually get a package from your manufacturer to your distribution to being repackaged to all the way to a customer's front door. So, the main question that customers ask me is, what should I consider in selecting these distribution tests, given the complexity and the nature of how every shipment even might be different per SKU, per incoming vendor, or per customer delivery? So touching a little bit on that, I guess the even bigger question is, assuming that we don't even know why to do it yet, why would we carry out package testing? The main thing is, if you look at Amazon's methodology, they don't really ding you as much as you would think for a package being in bad condition. But what, they really do say is that at the end of the day, the market chooses which package is superior product. Customers vote with their wallets, and eventually a product that is negligent towards the customer experience from a packaging perspective ultimately suffers a lower user review and therefore will not dominate in the marketplace compared to its competitor. There's a lot of other reasons boiled in here. I mean, customer trust essentially boils down to, if someone's not going to buy something from you again and again, or you can't guarantee that result, then you don't really have a business, do you? If you can't generate the top line revenue, or your customer doesn't have that confidence, then everything else is a moot point. But assuming that's established, you have a myriad other benefits, including comparability between vendors, compliance to your marketplace requirements, as well as cost savings across the board if you do enough volume that it's worth validating. So let's talk a little bit about what the packaging actually is at every level. Generally, and this is a very generalistic example, your specific distribution environment might vary slightly, but at a broad level, goods are bought and shipped at a wholesale level, and they're bought and shipped at a skid level. So these are bulk shipments on pallets. You might imagine everything that could go wrong with that nature of shipment. Things like it gets slammed into the sidewalls, forklift handling punctures it, it gets tipped over, it gets dropped on different corners, edges, it gets slammed directly into a wall at a tilt. Think of like a runaway pump truck scenario. It actually goes on a truck, and very much like a child at the back of the school bus getting what might be a 1 or 3 inch displacement from the seat at a fairly low hertz vibration level, the package undergoes the same stress in the back of a truck. You might think of like an unrestricted vertical bounce. And so ultimately, this is a stress that is placed at the skid level, at every level actually, but at the skid level specifically because of the amount of mass and inertia being generated. So once the skid reaches your distribution warehouse, it's generally either kept at a skid level or transferred to a case level. Now, assuming the case environment, the key stresses that can be placed on a case are very similar to a skid, but the differentiation being that a case can also be clamped. So more often than not, either side clamping or sideways vertical clamping is also a stressor. The additional stressor that's placed on boxes, both at the unit and case level, unit being the product ready for delivery, is that they're handled by hand. And people are creatures of error, and anything that can go wrong probably will go wrong at some point in time in the distribution cycle. So it's important that manufacturers actually do assess that if this outcome happened, what would happen to the package if we did drop it on this corner, if we did drop it on this face. Especially think about the scenario where you're holding liquids, right? That's where the leak testing as the end stage compliance also comes into play, because it can be tested either at the skid level or at the case level for whether the package intrinsically is holding its strength. So going a little bit more into assuming we know the plethora of options that exist, and then we know that tests need to be conducted, we know they're important. Question becomes, how do we actually select the appropriate one? The nice thing about the standards and the way they're written is they're fairly bespoke. They're based around a couple of user input parameter type details, and the key modes of how they operate are, what's the actual product detail? We're looking at dimension, weight, is it skidded and palletized or is it boxed? Now, the second thing we generally look at is, how is it being transported, right? Is this being moved around on mainly truck cargo? Is it ground? Does it take air freight? If it does take air freight, is there anything semi-permeable as a barrier that might be prone to, or not, that's prone to burst, or that's something to be evaluated? Can it be pressurized? So that's a whole element of investigation in determining the appropriate test series. The third element we generally look at is climatic and handling conditions. Depending on the materials your packaging is made of, certain climatic conditions can be more detrimental to the integrity of the package. Specifically, you might think a very high humidity environment might be more detrimental for fiberboard, because you can imagine what happens if you spray water onto cardboard. Now imagine this is permeated through the air. Finally, The distribution chain's complexity, if you have multiple hops and legs, testing can be custom programmed. If you anticipate that something would be, for example, loaded on a container ship in China, moved to a distribution point on the West Coast, then trucked over to the middle of the country, and then centrally distributed by air to another location. Each of these segments could be simulated by the appropriate stressor inline as per these standards. And finally, budget and what your customer demands of you are the two biggest drivers of what ends up happening from what I've seen. There's all the stuff of what we wish would happen, and then at the end of the day, it's how much money do we have to allocate to the testing budgets to prove these facts, and what do we actually have to do in order to make this licensable for sale. A good example is Amazon testing, where many of my customers, if they did not complete the testing, receive a chargeback on that associated ASIN number. A good example of a distribution environment where the testing directly benefits from a straight line cost benefit perspective. So now that we talked about what you would select to make the test happen, let's talk a little bit about the tests that actually happen at the skid case and unit level. These are, there's a plethora of tests that can be applied, and a large number of them are actually fairly custom in nature. So for the purpose of this presentation, I kept it light and easy. If you have any other questions after, feel free to email me and I can walk you through it. But at the skid level, essentially there's a bifurcation of thinking, is this a unitized load or a non-unitized load? For example, a unitized load, you could imagine you're a manufacturer of soy milk, something that's fairly regular item, gets produced in volume, in bulk, and you're bringing in maybe even container loads full of it. Because this load is roughly the same, it's shipped together in units of the same type, it's packed as a unit, and it's generally interoperable with one another, we would classify this a unitized load. Now, the opposite of this is the LTL load, where more often than not, you might imagine you have a sensitive box. It gets put onto a skid, gets strapped down and wrapped, but it's an irregular load. This is generally shipped when you rent a truck or trailer or skid space from a third party. And that actually has a different test series because the stresses that we anticipate seeing on that package are actually a little different. In a unitized load scenario, we would see more compressive effects. And in a non-unitized, we might see more handling effects because the forklift actually moves it around more. At the case level, we generally worry more about box type tests. So key bifurcation here, is it being done for a particular vendor's requirements, or is it being done just to prove parcel delivery? At the case level, we can also assess ISTA 3B if it's being shipped, as I mentioned, on a pallet. Now, at the unit level, and this is where we really get down to the individual packaged products for delivery to the customer, to their door front, we generally see the testing be more centralized around tests of a FedEx carrier nature. So things like drop testing, manual handling, vibration with and without a top load, and finally drop testing to the customer's door. At a high level, this is, as I mentioned, the 3E testing. The key thing I want to highlight here is that 3E test includes a compression, machine apply and release, and it involves mechanical handling of the package to check for the rotational drops as well as vibration. The difference here in the 3B testing is that we assess what's called concentrated impact as well as forklift handling, and the other shock procedures are roughly not the same but analogous with the same intent. There are slight divergences, but for the most part, they have the same philosophy. But where there's a break is because there's a forklift handling course involved. You can imagine if you ship it, it's going to get handled a lot more going through FedEx freight than if you're doing your own container loads. And then finally, as I mentioned, for 3A, parcel delivery for 150 pounds or less, the series looks a little simpler, but the implication of what's happening in step 4 is there's actually 4 sub-tests happening on different sides of the box, and it simulates it being handled through a delivery center and eventually being taken out for delivery in a cubby style, in like a delivery truck, almost like a UPS truck or a FedEx truck. How they sort the load in the back is slightly different as well. Curiosity asked ISTA about that a while back, and they said it's actually built based on simulations of how the package is carried in transit. So In conclusion, I mean, I know I said a lot, and of course, this webinar will be recorded and available on LinkedIn Live for your review later. If you have any other questions, you can email me as well. But in conclusion, e-commerce is evolving. Um, Large number of changes in the supply chain, how distribution and warehousing and production are actually conducted, as well as the prevalence of the data and the ability to process it, create the opportunity for more and more manufacturers to have lean, just-in-time production systems. And at the end of the day, if you're really operating at that fast of a speed, if there's any flaws in the system, it's either going to slow down throughput or have a severe impact on your customers' needs. So in today's modern e-commerce era, a strong online future really just depends on getting products to customers safely and efficiently, and of course at the right price. But that's a whole other story. Now, any questions, like I mentioned, feel free to get in touch. My information is available here. There will also be a period for questions at the end, so feel free to either save them or submit them to the chat, and we'll have a moment to address them. Thank you. I appreciate your attention, and I'm going to send it back over to Greg now. Greg, I think you're muted. Maybe, perhaps.
Thank you for that. We were. Thank you, Sreyas. I really appreciate that. Look into sort of the world of environmental testing as a package or caseload or LTL load goes from one end of the world to another.
My pleasure. Thank you, Greg.
Yeah. Tim, do you have any thoughts on what he said before we jump into ours?
I don't know if I have any new thoughts to add, but we'll definitely build on what you said, that e-commerce is changing. It's evolving, and the needs are different than they were even just a few years ago. So, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. We'll wait until we get to that part of the discussion, but absolutely a good first step leading into what we're going to talk about next.
Amazing.
Well, I'll see you at the end of this, Sreyas. All right, let's get this going. All right, so quick introductions. My name is Greg Wilson. I work with Tony Wilson Marketing and Sales. We're a manufacturer's representative for all kinds of material handling, steel fabrication work, and now actually material flow. Mm-hmm. So we're based in Michigan, so we're kind of right in Automotive Central, and but do work with all kinds of clients. Today I have Tim Floyd with me to talk about what's changing in the e-commerce warehouse. And I think to get us started, I'm going to have Tim introduce himself and talk a little bit about more of a personal introduction, maybe.
Okay. Well, again, thank you both Sreyas and Greg for the opportunity to be on the show today. My background started out in manufacturing, actually started out in sales, but a family business situation, then made a switch to manufacturing. I'm a hands-on guy, enjoy the manufacturing side of it. It's what I've done for 30 years now. So the first 12 years, more on the packaging engineering side of things, spent a lot of time with companies such as Sreyas and Megalab doing testing for converting expendables to returnables, that sort of thing, for about 12 years. And then for the last 12 years, been more intra-logistics, lean material flow with Geolean, and really picking up where Sreyas left off. Once you have the right package and you can deliver safely to the customer, how do we move that internally and get it delivered and process it, whatever is needed? So I've had the privilege of physically manufacturing parts, moving to the packaging side of the table, now internal logistics, and physically building equipment that changes material flow. So that's where we're at today.
And so where we're going to start today is really the question of how is e-commerce operations changing? And one of the first things that we spoke about when we were making this presentation is about the changing responsibilities in the warehouse. And you can kind of speak a little bit more to, as we mentioned in the testing, like making sure that things are getting from point A to B safely, but then also the behavior changes and sort of the expectations changing.
Sure, and this is exactly what I was talking about when I said we'll build on what Sreyas has said. The evolution in the warehouse, from our perspective, a material handling, packaging group here, testing group, is that additional responsibilities are now being taken place in the warehouse. I'd like to say this, in the years of experience working in manufacturing companies, the warehouse, we seldom did solutions in the warehouse. We focused on assembly and point of use for the materials because the warehouse just was a cross dock. It picked up pallets, moved them, you loaded them on trucks, and that was all they did. And now warehouses are being challenged to sequence delivery in, to repackage parts, to inspect parts, and in many cases do sub-assembly of parts. So we've got this new responsibilities, but at least from our experience, we're not necessarily seeing the education with the change. And so we believe there's a tremendous opportunity to help people that find themselves in a situation to do a greater value add solution in the warehouse. I guess one thought I wrote down here is we can no longer ignore the warehouse, right?
Yeah. If
we're going to be more efficient and deliver the job at a fair price, good quality, it's time to become efficient in the warehouse. So.
Yeah. And one of the points that we've been discussing too is that there's a lot of talk going around about fully automating solutions, robotics, conveyor belts, and all of those sorts of things. But there seems to be a lot of space for non-automated solutions too, which is a lot of what Geolean works with.
Yeah, I appreciate that segue. We tend to look at things very binary, the wrong way and the right way of moving material flow. Obviously, it's more complicated than that. And for the purpose of discussion here today, I am certain everyone listening has their own plans and strategies to attack efficient material flow. Hopefully, we can add to that a little bit today.
Yeah, and then kind of the next thing I wanted to move into in this is what we've seen as the most common measurement opportunities, like measurable opportunities of when you implement a lean solution or any kind of solution in a warehouse, like what are you trying to control? And the first one is first in, first out, inventory control and lot control. You can speak a little bit to that if it makes sense.
Yeah, so going back pre-COVID, I would say that 95% of our business was on the assembly side of manufacturing. And the move for e-commerce is unarguably that it was building and growing over the last decade. But what happened during COVID was it forced this industry into the next generation. It forced e-commerce to be efficient, to deliver because it was convenient and it's what people demanded. And I believe that's here to stay. But what we're seeing are some of those old processes still taking place in the warehouse where we're moving large pallets, but the demand is for individual pieces. We're not controlling the first in, first out or lot control. And again, this is not to pick on anyone. It's the experience we're hearing in the field when we ask what challenges they're seeing is that we're being told we're not managing our inventory properly. We just need to be more efficient in our picking. So, things like gravity flow racks are a great way to do that. This sort of ties into your previous question about where do we fit into the space. I like to call it the walk versus run scenario. You got companies still moving everything in bulk with a forklift, but being challenged to look at automation. I mean, there's no argue that, you got lean warehouse 4.0, all these different, options that are out there. I'm not an automation specialist. We work with people who do, but there's a tremendous space pre-automation to adapt your processes, to make sure you're controlling inventory properly, to make sure you understand that material flow. Then once your inventory is balanced, your process is balanced, and you understand what you're doing, then move to automation if it makes sense, if it makes fiscal sense. Right?
Well, and then beyond just that first in, first out, and making sure that things are going well on a sequencing level, even on receiving goods and using goods, it's the inspection, repacking, and sequencing. Like I know we've spoken a little bit about repackaging being a big problem in some places, where it's like you're not getting those inspections done, not presenting parts correctly, and you're not sequencing like the flow of things as it's going through an assembly line, which as we're seeing, there's a lot of sub-assembly happening in the warehouse space now.
So, you know, to comment on that real quick, the example I can't help but giving, because a customer gave it to me, was, you know, from a clothing manufacturer where literally for their first 40 years in business, they ship truck and train loads into their large customers like the Walmarts and the Targets. And what has happened because of e-commerce now is my wife and your wife, I'm sure as a listener, are calling up and they're ordering one thing, right? And these warehouses have to now go grab that one item, repackage it, label it, and ship it out to you at the same cost you go to the department store and purchase it for. And that's where the real challenge and efficiency is lying. And how can we handle that? Now, e-commerce, I think we could maybe add to that fulfillment in general, because if you're a warehouse delivering to a manufacturer, or you're a cross-dock facility, or you're a e-commerce direct facility or a fulfillment center of any type, these challenges are the same for you. You're grabbing a more dynamic selection of inventory at a lower volume, and your demands from your customer are higher. You've got to do it faster, cheaper, more efficient, safe. And now we got operators moving at this tremendous pace, and we want to keep it safe and ergonomic as well. Right?
Yeah, making sure that people aren't bending over, rushing to places, or, you know, hurting themselves.
Sure. I mean, I think in a lot of ways, the warehouses are finding out challenges that they've never faced before. Safety and ergonomics was limited to don't lift things heavy. And now it's repetition, very much like an assembly plant taking place in the warehouse.
Yeah. So we wanted to, before we jump into sort of more concrete examples of the types of structures that are going into it, we wanted to give a little bit of word as to where Geolean fits into this. We've been talking a lot about some of the solutions that have come up, but Tim's told me the company was truly founded on lean principles.
Absolutely. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about who we are, what Geolean does in the market space. So we've got this little logo image there. You'll see 3 segments of the business. We are built on the Toyota production system. You know, we don't hide from it. It's not our own original with us. It's TPS. And there is a consulting segment to our business where we enterprise-wide spend time and build relationships. And these are typically 6-month to multi-year relationships with customers to do enterprise-wide lean process and material flow improvements. Then we also have products, modular systems that support the building of low-cost structures so you can realize rapid change at a low cost in your plant. Kind of what we were talking about before, that walk before you run scenario.
Yeah.
You know, automation's great, but before we spend hundreds of thousands or even millions on revamping the warehouse, let's walk first. Let's build structures that allow us to kit materials, deliver in sequence, improve ergonomics and efficiency, and then, you know, we can build on those.
And even in addition to the structures that Tim builds, they are solution agnostic. So they don't, you know, if there's something that just doesn't work in, you know, we'll get into it in a moment, but like kind of a tube and joint style cart or rack or workstation or anything like that, we'll find a better way to do it.
Right. I mean, so we've got the methodology of lean, we've got the materials to build modular solutions. We design, build, and install. But like you said, sometimes the product you've got in front of you isn't the right solution. And it's very important for us at the foundation to remain agnostic. If it needs to be welded, if it needs to be a cage, if it needs to be automation, then that's what it needs to be.
Right. And in that way, like you become an extension of the team. And I know that when you go into a place, you're not just talking to management either. You're getting on the floor with people and actually seeing the space, working through it, seeing what can be done with it, and then building something truly catered to it.
Sure. I mean, obviously, when we're talking to different people within a company, the challenges that they're concerned with solving are different. An engineer at the floor level just needs to improve ergonomics, right? Or the plant manager needs to see a better throughput. The challenges are different, but at the end of the day, the only way to improve material flow is to talk to people doing the work. Mm-hmm. So we're very much on the ground level, hands-on. we're an extension of your team. I can't think of a better way to say that.
Yeah. And so that's where Geolean sits in sort of the span of all of this. Now let's do a little show and tell of the types of systems that come into play when we're doing this. We touched on this a little bit, but tube and joint structures are going to be a lot of what the photo examples we have are, as sort of modular fixtures in a plant or equipment that you'd use on a day-to-day basis. They can be built into kitting solutions, flow racks, workstations, all of those sorts of things. I'm going to have you touch on this one because it's software integrating like into ERP systems.
Sure.
And things like that. It's not necessarily just that, but.
Well, it's, as we mentioned, the evolution, our goal is to put a structure in place that solves an immediate problem, but continues to evolve into that future state. So we're working with a customer right now where we're developing some modular workstations. They call them furniture because every weekend when we go back, it seems they've rearranged them. They're learning their material flow. But once they start getting in stride and now, you know, the process is controlled, sometimes you need assistance to further error-proof that solution, whether it's a simple pick-to-light system that integrates with an ERP system. In the example of this customer, they'll scan a barcode, it lights up what images they need to pick, right? That's all built into this structure of a workstation. Sometimes it's cameras that are saying red light, green light, what you did is correct, move on to the next process. I mean, as we ask more and more of our people, anything we can do to further error-proof and streamline their processes is the way to go. And so, yes, software integration can be a big part of kitting and material flow solutions.
Yeah, and then the final one that we'll touch on a little bit later too is the use of mother-daughter carts. And these are a tugger-based solution that helps de-forklift, I guess, gets that fork out of there, so that you can be a little bit more safe in handling, but also kind of have like another modular way to like handle movement of goods through a warehouse.
Sure, little inside joke there. Appreciate you. But yes, I'm going to use that term de-forklift. Forklift-free initiatives are a big thing on the assembly side and becoming a bigger thing in the warehouse. Not that you'll ever achieve forklift-free, but forklift efficient. You know, keep it out of the assembly area, the safety areas. So moving from forklift to tugging, I think, is something that most people are very familiar with.
Yeah.
We like to look at, once you've made that decision that there's a better way to move materials by tugging, there are many options to consider, right? And mother-daughter carts is a way to take all that non-value added activity of decoupling and reloading trailers to just drop off a full, pick up an empty very efficiently.
Yeah. So now we're going to get into a little bit of the common structures you'll see throughout the case studies we're going to present. First, our flow racks. This is a great way to like build pick faces into, you know, really anywhere, but and also in the presentation of materials at an assembly cell or a pack line or things like that. Pack stations and work cells. So this is kind of a combination of all of the things that we're talking about today. How does it all come together in one unit? And then kitting carts, and that's anything you have to pick, pack, or put away, or pick or put away, I guess.
Sure.
But yeah, those are the three big things that we're going to go into today. And I think as far as flow racks go, the first thing we're going to show is how this is an example from took wholesale out of one of your presentations.
Sure.
Is a before and after of a lane that got about 170 more pick faces.
Exactly. And this is a great example of, we talked about the issues in the warehouse, and these are solutions that we've addressed with those issues. FIFO is a big one here, right? When you're picking parts off a pallet, there needs to be operator discipline to grab the right part. When you've got a flow rack in place, you're going to pick from the front and load from the back. And, this is a particular example where space savings was the #1 challenge. They needed more room in the warehouse. But we identified a lack of first in, first out. We identified some safety issues with forklifts and pedestrians in the same aisle, right? And by introducing something as simple as a gravity flow rack, we addressed that FIFO issue. We addressed the safety issue of materials flowing in one direction. But in this specific example, in 2 aisles of warehouses shown in the pictures here, we created 170 additional pick faces simply by looking at the high moving, smaller packaging type inventory that can be moved down to floor level, where operators can just grab it into a kit cart in many cases and complete the process.
Yeah. And kind of moving on from that into a bigger solution, or I guess like a little bit more complex solution. This is an example of a modular packaging line that took different elements of kitting carts and workstations and whatnot and put it in a way that could kind of be moved, maneuvered. You can actually take some of the packaging materials out and put a new, like a fresh kit cart full of them in. And if you want to kind of touch on some things that I may have missed in that, where is the state of this today?
No, you're doing our presentation just great. But right. This example in front of us here is, as you mentioned, it's an inspection, kitting, packaging, and out to shipping last stop in the warehouse. So it's very common depending on industries. This happens to be an electronics manufacturer, but whatever widget you are processing and moving, it's the same idea. Parts come in on a kit cart at the far right of this workstation where you see the red printers. The part gets inspected, tested, gets a label and a signature on it, moves down to kitting with flyers and bags and all the things that go into this kit, and bubble wrapped, sealed, labeled, and shipped out for UPS or FedEx out the other side. This is about 40 feet long. What's unique about this particular workflow is they change operations at various points throughout the day. Rather than disrupting the flow of materials, you can have different size boxes, different inventory of parts pre-staged behind the line. When needs change, you just literally swap out the furniture in a matter of 2 minutes, and the operators continue working for the rest of the day. It's just a way to keep your operators efficient with very simple modular structures.
Yeah. And then the next example we're going to go through is a quick one. It's a before and after of kind of paring a space down from, whoa, crazy, so many different things going on. Like you can't even tell that this is, I can't really tell from this that it's a work cell, to like concept in design of taking everything and figuring out the angles and the right packaging size and the presentation and all of those things to what it ended up being on the floor.
To your point, I don't know if you can call them before a work cell. It's a garbage bin, right? Everything's just sort of, hey, we might need bubble wrap, we might need tape, and we might need one of 10 size boxes. So let's just throw it all in there and we'll figure it out as we go. And unfortunately, we see too much of this. Mm-hmm. So literally, it's as simple as a place for everything and everything in its place. If it's not necessary to do the work, it needs to be removed from the work cell. Let's focus on the 80-20, the 80% of parts and processes that we do on a given day, and manage the exceptions another way.
Yeah.
And the two biggest challenges in the e-commerce warehouse that we see from a material handling standpoint is the product life cycle, right? We talked about inspection, repackaging, all the things that physically happen to this package as it goes through the process. The other one is real estate. When you come back and say the warehouse now needs to do subassembly, repacking, all these other things, there isn't real estate on the floor to make these things happen. And so this particular example here, where we've just reorganized and given everything a place inside the work cell, sped up the process by 1/3. There's a 30% efficiency gain, but also a 60% gain in real estate savings, making the whole work cell smaller.
Wow.
And now we can put 4 of these work cells together and have people communicating and working more efficiently together in the space that we used to have 1.
Yeah. And then the last thing that we wanted to touch on as we were kind of talking about was the science of pushing and tugging. So this is real quick, like using carts and using tuggers instead of forklifts and just carrying things, right?
Well, this is what drives the need to be agnostic, because if we're talking small, lightweight parts, a push kit cart might be just fine.
Yeah.
When we're talking a 4,000-pound bin with stampings in it, a modular structure isn't going to work. And so, we understand the need for solutions that have super high weight capacities. Is it going to be shipped over the road? These are considerations that need to take place, because Many times it's all intralogistics we're talking about. But if that final assembly needs to go into another plant location, that over the road, this kitting cart needs to be set up for safe and a long life cycle of shipping over the road. And then working in tight spaces, what we're referring to at this point, when you talk about tugging, I hear all the time, well, we don't have the space for that. And so the fork truck makes it easier for us just to turn around in the aisle. And I'll tell you, with a quad steer system that we're used to doing with our tug carts, there's no reason in a 6-foot aisle you can't tug these things through. We can do U-turns and figure eights if that needs to happen. The challenge is we want our clients to understand, what do you need to happen to let us figure out the most efficient way to make that happen.
Yeah. So that then is our presentation. So this is my contact information. You can reach out to me. I can get you connected to Tim. Tim's also on LinkedIn. Geolean, it's geoleanusa.com. And with that, let's get Sreyas back in here so we can have a little chat. Hey, now you're muted.
Hey, awesome. Okay, that was a great presentation. It was nice to see. It's like real insightful look into some of the client problems and stuff in that space. That some of the things you're saying, I would have never anticipated that those are actually the value drivers of where the efficiency is brought from, right?
You know, we're talking at real high level here because we've got such a short time to sort of touch on some bullet points, but the goal is that hopefully one of those bullet points resonates with the listeners, and then we can dive much deeper into what the actual solution looks like.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
So Sreyas, are you seeing any questions?
Not at present, but maybe now is a good time to open it up to the floor, that if anyone does have any questions, please field them now and we're more than happy to answer.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
And this does run a little bit, our liveness runs a little bit counter to where everyone is on the other side. So we'll probably see things coming on over the next few minutes. So if we don't see it immediately, then you will get back to you.
And yeah, as mentioned earlier, that this whole presentation will be recorded as well. So our contact info is in there. If you ever have any question after the fact, feel free to shoot either of us an email. We can get you sorted out.
You know, I comment on that. We have Camille, it looks like, made a comment on there about this is a great setup, flexible, and allows for quick changeovers. We really didn't talk about that much on the call, but being flexible is the whole name of the game here. Not only are there higher demands on the warehouse, but those demands change by the hour, it seems like, right? And so being able to adapt is a key part of the strategy.
We're just seeing a thank you from Camille come in. Thank you. I appreciate you coming. Yes. So I know
Tim,
that. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. So while we wait for questions, I actually had a question for Tim while you were going through your presentation. It has a little bit to do with in my presentation, I was thinking about the bifurcation between skid, case, and unit levels. What kind of specialized handling or lean practices come into play when transferring between the different stages?
You just moving product to storage, you mean? Or
yeah, or like cutting it up into smaller lots, or actually like sub-handling.
Well, honestly, what you just mentioned is one of the first things we look for. You know, are we still moving things in bulk? Because that tends to come with a forklift movement. So is there opportunity to move into smaller packages? Because smaller packages allow us to keep less inventory at the line, present it to the operators in a more ergonomic fashion, more efficient fashion. Hopefully less walking, less reaching, all that. So, I mean, there's so many benefits to keeping things in the smallest container possible. We even look at a scenario of unpackaging. Is there a way that unwrapping, unboxing, these things can happen somewhere else in the plant, pre-storage, so that when they're actually presented to the point of use, there's no waste, right? We're just picking straight out of a part more efficiently. So, good opportunities for that. I guess without specific examples, love to get into that a little more. One example comes to mind. I think we talked about this the other day, was the moving of wheels inside an aerospace company.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a purchased product that comes in the door, prepackaged in an expendable box. And per FAA regulation, they're required to open that box, inspect the product prior to putting it into service or into storage, and whichever the case may be there. And so what we did for this particular company, because these wheels weigh over 50 pounds, they're heavy, there was a lot of extra handling, is they wanted to move them in quantities of 6 to the warehouse. Mm-hmm. So we developed a cart that holds 6 of these packages. So they come right off the trailer as they're delivered into the plant, into this cart. There's a shelf that pulls out on the bottom of the cart, which allows them to open the box, inspect the wheels without having to lift anything. When the inspection's done, roll it back into its slot, close the shelf, and you can deliver right to the storage racking with that particular solution. So the idea is giving them a little more control in the process, right? Controlling the lot. The ergonomics is greatly improved, but it actually improved efficiency as well. They're able to process from point A to point B much, much faster. Mm-hmm. So quite often, I mean, the material, the ideal kit, we have people all the time, we have a kitting initiative. Well, kitting isn't for everyone. There needs to be a justification for it. But when kitting makes sense, it should solve ergonomic, safety, efficiency. It should be a win for all parties.
And I thought I'd just pull up, this is actually the exact cart that
yes.
Tim was talking about. You see there's like a little modular wheel inspection base that comes out in that photo on the upper left. And then it all kind of tucks back in to just be a very nice footprint cart.
When you say the word cart, right, you can go to any number of sources and buy a generic shelf cart. When we talk about carts, we're talking a very specific design for your specific part to perform a specific function. Right? It's custom, but it's still low cost and rapid to install.
Yeah.
Thanks for pulling that up.
Yeah, you're welcome. I know we have a bit of a mix of an audience because I'm coming in from the US. Sreyas is coming in from Canada, but I know that we can both service both areas. I know I do a lot of calls into Canada, and Sreyas was just telling us that they have the capacity to work in the US too.
Yep. So, something I didn't mention when introducing Geolean, we are a global company with a global footprint. We started back in 2004, focused on the lean consulting side of the business, that Toyota lean methodology. In 2016, we expanded globally to be a systems integrator. We physically want to build the structures that affect material flow in manufacturing plants and warehouses. And that was the big transition that took place about 8 years ago. And so headquartered out of Paris, France, with North America headquarters by the Detroit Airport in Michigan, we do support all North America and have the capacity to support global customers.
Well, it's not looking like we have any questions today beyond what we were kind of talking about earlier. Is there anything more that you can think of, Sreyas, before we wrap up?
Just really that I think you guys did a fantastic presentation. It was really informative, and I really appreciate the insights you bring to the e-commerce space. Being the tester, we only really see one side of the world, and it's kind of a destructive one and kind of an unforgiving one. But seeing how much love actually goes into the production process, how much care that manufacturers and brands have for protecting their identities, and the measures that they actually go through to not only ensure that they're profitable, that their operations have that very, very high level of quality for the customer. It's all implicit, it's all built in. And I always say this, we live in an engineered world, and people don't understand the nuances of what the implication of that really means, right? Nothing happens by accident. So, I think as time goes on, this stuff will become more and more relevant, because, the real nature of it is people have been doing this kind of stuff for a while, but it's been highly inaccessible to the average business owner, right? It's been relegated to someone who's really doing this. If you're doing a huge volume operation, I mean, automakers know these concepts for some time, right? But because they push the volumes that they've been able to do it for decades, but now suddenly you have smaller vendors who are, can find the gains because the information is so accessible. So I think from a world of packaging and lean operation, it's really a beautiful time because of everyone is really enabled to do the best possible job.
Well, and I think you've got an entire industry so focused on the future state, right? Which is good. We need to be focused on where we're going and the investment it's going to take to get us there. But that whole walk versus run again, there's just a tremendous void right now where we're just trying to educate people, and this is a better way of doing it today, not next year, not in 5 years. And perfect. The word care, we use the word passion. If you're not passionate about material flow, you're just not going to find these solutions. But we don't do anything that's tremendously scientific. But the reality is everyone is sourced with so many responsibilities at their jobs that they just don't have the time to watch and implement a better way. And we just want to be an extension of your team. And Sreyas, I know you share that same passion. It's just what's the best way to do it, and that's a symbiotic relationship.
Absolutely. I think there's a big commonality between yours and my business in that while there is a cookie cutter approach to doing it, when you actually get into what's happening, the weeds of each project, it's completely custom. It ends up being unique because of the unique nature of every manufacturing environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
But any other questions coming up? Or I feel like the audience is exhausted. Maybe our presentation was pretty good. We took care of, we nipped them right in the bud.
And hey, I don't know how it is over the US today, but right here, it's a little bit of a second kind of cloudy, rainy day. So it's, maybe there just isn't as much energy. And that's okay.
Oh, yeah. Dark skies are rolling, eh?
Hey, it's getting to that time of year.
Oh, yeah.
Well, hey, I'll kind of lead the sign off here. Thank you for coming to Built for Motion today, especially with sort of a new topic for us. Would appreciate any feedback that you guys have. If anybody wants to connect with myself, Tim or Sreyas, please do. We're on LinkedIn. If you go through the recording of this, it'll be available on the event page. And we'll also have it available on a Google Doc or a Google Drive if it's a little bit harder to access or if there's a need to share or anything like that. Hope to see you next time. We'll send out invitations as soon as we know when that is.
Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you as well. I appreciate the opportunity to present with y'all and see you at the next one. Bye, everyone.
See ya.